the US Director of Intelligence, Avril Haines.
They put the right people in place and in power to take action. And so we watch as authoritarian states take advantage of that open information space and, promote their own narratives and exacerbate divisions in our society. And I think this is something that, is sort of a growing area for intelligence communities. As I watch so many of my kind of interlocutors begin to develop, sort of offices and centers and so on, looking at foreign malign influence, as it's sometimes referred to, and, and thinking about how do we manage this in our areas. And in the context of Russia, Ukraine, I thought it was really interesting. I learned certainly a lot of lessons through the experience, and among them was in this space. So we obviously tried to counter disinformation that the Russians were putting out. We saw that they were looking to create a pretext for the invasion, and we wanted to sort of debunk that and help people understand that this was a false narrative. And so by finding ways to declassify certain information while still trying to protect our sources and methods so we don't lose the access that is so critical to our work, we were able to have an impact, in a sense, on the conversation about this. And yet at the same time, what also is clear as you sort of look back at the situation is that our impact was far greater in the West than it was in other places in the world, right? So when it came to Russia, we had basically no impact. The people of Russia had controlled information provided to them for the most part, very hard to penetrate in effect. But we also saw, you can sort of understand that in the Russia space, you recognize how much effort the Russian government, Putin, puts into controlling information in Russia. But what we also saw was that we were not that impactful in other countries that already had sort of taken on the narrative of what the Russians were pushing. And the Russians engaged in a very concerted information campaign and around the world on these issues. And one of their main narratives is that the United States is provoking this conflict and that NATO and Ukraine are, setting the conditions and threatening Russia, and that sort of forced them into this position. And in fact, when you are pushing out information to a population that is already skeptical of you, it's much harder to gain traction in those scenarios. So we recognize that we were able to have impact, I think, in countering disinformation, but that there were limits on what we were able to do, and that we needed to understand that in order to really understand how we can counter this moving forward.
So let me pick up a few of those themes. I think I agree with the thrust of your argument there. The first thing around declassification of intelligence, as a 30-year intelligence professional, then this is quite hard in many ways, and I think our people find it quite hard.
Yeah.
You've put a lot of effort into getting secret intelligence, but I always think there's no point collecting it unless you use it. The sea change we've seen during this conflict of getting the intelligence out there and using it to pre-bunk, to try and undermine that sort of narrative. I completely agree with that. But of course, it is also the case, as you've said, that for much of the world, they haven't completely bought into that side of the argument. And much as we know it to be truthful, there are different and counter narratives running.